Iron, in its raw state, is soft. Pulled straight from the earth, it bends beneath pressure, yields to the hammer, offers no real resistance to anything determined to reshape it. This is an uncomfortable truth for anyone who imagines that strength of character arrives as a birthright, fully formed, waiting only to be discovered. It does not. What we call an iron will was never iron to begin with. It was ordinary metal, unremarkable and yielding, subjected to fire it did not choose and pressure it did not welcome, until something in its molecular structure rearranged itself into a substance capable of withstanding forces the original material could never have survived. This is the forgotten mechanics of character, buried beneath centuries of mythology that prefer to imagine greatness as innate rather than manufactured. We speak of a person's iron will as though it were a gift bestowed at birth, when in truth it was assembled, deliberately or through circumstance, through a process no less demanding than the metallurgy from which the phrase itself was borrowed. The heat that softens the metal enough to be reshaped, in a human life, arrives as failure, as loss, as the specific humiliation of having tried and fallen short in full view of people who will remember. The hammer that does the actual reshaping is repetition, the same difficult choice, made correctly, thousands of times, long after the drama of any single choice has worn off entirely. Consider what actually separates the person whose resolve dissolves at the first serious obstacle from the person whose resolve seems to strengthen under identical pressure. It is tempting to attribute this difference to some inborn quality, a constitution simply built differently from birth. But examine the biographies of those history remembers for their unbreakable resolve, and a different pattern emerges consistently. Nearly all of them began soft. Nearly all of them yielded, at some earlier point, to pressures that would later seem trivial compared to what they eventually endured. The difference was never that they started harder than everyone else. The difference was that they remained in the fire long enough, and submitted to the hammer often enough, for their internal composition to actually change. This distinction matters enormously, because it relocates the entire question of character from the realm of fixed inheritance into the realm of active construction, available to anyone willing to undergo the specific, uncomfortable process required. You are not owed an iron will simply for wanting one badly enough. Wanting is the soft metal's condition, unchanged and unremarkable until something with sufficient heat and pressure actually acts upon it. This is why sincere intention so rarely produces lasting transformation on its own. Intention alone generates no heat, applies no hammer, and soft metal left merely wishing to be strong remains, indefinitely, soft metal. There is a specific danger worth naming here, because it explains why so many people undergo genuine hardship without ever emerging from it with anything resembling iron will. Heat alone does not forge strength. Metal subjected to fire without the disciplined shaping of the hammer simply melts, loses its form entirely, becomes something weaker and less useful than it was before the fire ever touched it. This is precisely what happens to people who endure difficulty without deliberately extracting meaning and discipline from that difficulty. The hardship arrives, the suffering is genuine, and yet nothing of lasting strength is built, because suffering alone, without the accompanying discipline of reflection and repeated correct choice, produces collapse rather than character. This is why two people can survive the identical catastrophe and emerge as entirely different metals, one hardened into something capable of withstanding far greater pressure than before, the other permanently softened, more vulnerable to future pressure than they were originally. The hammer, then, deserves as much attention as the fire, because it is the hammer, the deliberate, repeated shaping, that determines whether heat produces strength or merely produces melting. This hammer takes an unglamorous form in daily life. It is the discipline of returning, after every failure, to the exact same standard you held before the failure occurred, refusing to lower that standard simply because maintaining it has become newly difficult. It is the specific choice, repeated at every opportunity to compromise, of holding the line anyway, not because holding it feels satisfying in the moment, but because each instance of holding adds another stroke to a shape slowly being formed, invisible in any single instance, unmistakable across a sufficient accumulation of them.